Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where on the world you're joining us from, and welcome back to the final day of the O2LAC Virtual Week 2020. We're closing this 8-day long event on a very high note, and we're very excited about this session. For the past 9 years, as you know, O2LAC has been offering a space for technology service companies from across Latin America and the Caribbean to network, to explore business opportunities through our matchmaking system, and to learn about the latest trends in technology directly from the companies who are pushing the envelope in their respective areas. Today's session will be conducted entirely in English. Esta sesión será en inglés, así que los invitamos a utilizar el botón de interpretación simultánea que encontrarán en la parte de abajo de la ventana. Today we're joined by a very special speaker, and we're very excited to have him. But before I introduce him, we want to remind you to share your questions on the chat. The team will be checking out the chat and will be selecting the best questions to share before the session ends. It is my honor to welcome our special guest and today's speaker for the session, Cybersecurity in the Age of Remote Work. Eugenio Pace is the CEO and co-founder of Auth0. Pace co-founded Auth0 in early 2013 with CTO and brother-in-arms, Matthias Wolowski, while living 7,000 miles apart from each other. So if this doesn't make him an expert on remote collaborative work, I don't know what does. Since then, Pace has played an instrumental role in growing Auth0 into a leading identity management company that is loved by developers and trusted by global enterprises. He loves traveling and has visited more than 35 countries for business and pleasure. He currently lives in Redmond, Washington with his wife, 2 sons, and their Labrador Retriever. In his spare time, he enjoys the outdoors, rowing, riding bikes, spending time with his family, writing his blog, restoring his 1970 Carmen Ghia, which, and he will explain this a bit later, we recently learned is a classic sports car made by Volkswagen, and reading history and philosophy. But a little bit more about Auth0. The promise of Auth0 is that developers only need to add a few lines of code to their applications to add access to its identity management service for external users and to give their own employees access to their internet services too. Auth0 announced just last week that it has raised a $120 million Series F round led by Salesforce Ventures, bringing the total valuation to $1.92 billion. Eugenio, bienvenido, you have the floor.
Gracias, Itzel. Thank you very much. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, maybe for some of you as well. It's great to be here. Thank you, O2LAC, for the opportunity to share our story and share, what we've been up to. So maybe a quick. I will start with a quick wrap on how we started. Before Auth0, I worked for Microsoft for many years. I started work in Microsoft Argentina, and then I moved to Microsoft Corp here in Washington State, and I always worked in the developer space. So my job has always been, my entire career has been about empowering developers to build better applications and to build more robust, more secure apps. The Auth0 journey started actually started in 2009, 2010, when during my Microsoft time, I wrote a short book titled, if you can see it over there, a claims-based identity and access control guide. And so this book was actually the seed for what eventually became Auth0. I was looking at the challenges of application builders, developers, building applications and moving applications to the cloud. And so that was, early on, the cloud was beginning. Now the cloud is here to stay. And we were lucky that it was very timely to solve this very old problem. So what Auth0 does in a nutshell, it's every time you go to a website, every time you open an application on a phone and you enter username and password, or you put your finger on Touch ID, or now your face on a camera, or you log in with Google or Facebook or Twitter or with Apple now, anything that happens behind that, the process of identifying a user and then deciding what that user can do, That's the question that Auth0 solves, right? For if you're building an application and you need to identify users and then decide what those users are empowered to do, that's the problem that we solve. So we in 2012, so now like going back to our origins, I left Microsoft in 2012. At the end of 2012, we founded the company in January 2013. And since then, we've been on this journey growing in just providing better tools, better APIs, better building blocks to help developers in the world solve this problem. As was mentioned before, we founded the company, the two founders of the company. I'm one of them. Matthias Wolowski is the second founder of the company and CTO of the company. He lives in Argentina. And when we started, we decided that, I was not going to move back to Argentina. I've been living here for many years, and Matthias was not going to move to the United States. And so from day one, we decided to kind of make the best of the situation. And so we decided to start the company embracing a remote distributed culture. And by that, we decided that talent is everywhere, specifically talent in Latin America. It's awesome and fantastic, and time zone, it's very convenient as well. So we're not that far away from each other in terms of time zone. And we've been able to recruit with those priorities. So for us, recruiting, it's first talent, second time zone, and third the location, the physical location wherever those people are. So today, fast forward, we are 700 people company. We are in more than 30 countries, if you count everybody where everybody is. That's not to say that we don't like offices. We don't take like an extreme position on remote work. We have 6 offices around the world, one here in Seattle, in Washington State, in the United States. We have an office in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. We have an office in London, Singapore, Sydney, and Tokyo. So from day one, we were already a global company, perhaps earlier than other companies our size and our maturity, right? So with that, we've been able to serve a global population because, again, the problem that we solve is not really, it's not unique to United States or unique to Europe or unique to Asia Pacific. Anybody building applications around the world has this problem. And so today we have more than 10,000 customers of all industries, whether it's media and entertainment or financial services or manufacturing, you name it, we have customers in all those industry segments, right? So that's a bit of what we do. And it's been really very timely that we did that, and very fortunate too, because it gave us 7 years of practice to work outside an office. So you can see, my background. This is my home. This is my home office. Actually, this is where Auth0 started. Actually, this is our office number 1. And but given the situation in the world, where a lot of companies were not used to working remote, we were able to adjust very quickly. Just so you know, even though we're heavily distributed, not everybody was in working from home. So around 60% of our company is made up of people that work from home normally, even before the pandemic hit, right? But the reconversion was really easy for us, and it wasn't, easy from a work perspective. Of course, we all have the same problems of home, children, homeschooling, and having to cook 3 meals a day every day for everybody. So I get interrupted as many others accidentally by my kids or my dog eventually. So those challenges we're not immune to, but the ability to serve our customers and to continue to deliver on our product have been have not been hampered by this situation. So pandemic, I get a lot of questions often around how um, how our, how we see the world evolving with this situation that we are in. And it's a really unfortunate situation for sure. Like many of you, I'm affected the same way. Personally, my family, my extended family, there's no one immune to the situation. But as oftentimes happens, in don't let a good crisis be spoiled. That's the saying, right? So this is also an opportunity. It's tough times for a lot of people, and obviously it would be better if we didn't have to go through this, but we have to, and we don't have control of that. We cannot avoid it. It's just happening around us. And so this crisis has, I think, positive impact for many and for the world in general. And I think we will look back into this time, historical times, and we will look and see, wow, this is the world has evolved, and the companies have evolved, and the economy has evolved, and it has evolved in many ways in a positive way. So one of those positives is that in 2 months or 3 months, we're seeing an acceleration and a transformation of digital and online experiences that would have taken years to happen, right? So I saw somewhere on Twitter and other places, like, who is the biggest driver for your digital transformation in a company? Is it the CEO? Is it the an expensive agency that you hired? No, it's the pandemic, right? So in the United States, e-commerce penetration before pandemic was around, rough give or take, 15%. So it took 10 years for the US economy to grow an online retail business that only penetrated 15% of the market. Now we are at 30%. So we doubled, in the United States, we doubled digital transformation in months, what took us a decade to create. So that's how fast this is happening, right? And so any company without a digital experience is going to see, a disadvantage. Everybody had a website, but think about like the experience of your customers. Think about you like buying on a supermarket or buying on a home improvement store, and then doing the same things on a website or on a mobile or on your phone. Are those experiences the same? In a lot of those situations, the experience was tailored to the store experience. It's going there, it's parking, it's getting on your car, going to the store, walking around the aisles. That it's in many cases is gone, and now the digital experience will be as important or more important than the physical experience. But then look at education, look at healthcare. And I don't know the exact situation in many of your countries in Latin America, but in my personal experience, my kids are now forced to learn through Zoom, like what we're doing right now. And in many cases, it's been a better experience than being in school. Of course, it doesn't replace everything, but we don't have to look at one extreme or the other extreme. So digital transformation, that's a big theme, a big opportunity, and a big opportunity for all of us. But the darker side of that transformation is that, the more value moves to digital, the more attractive it is for bad agents. And unfortunately, we are seeing a dramatic increase on the number of attacks and the number of threats in the online world, because that's where the value is. So at any point in time, and just to give you a context, we process roughly 4.5 billion login transactions per month, right? So that's in 1, 2, 3, in those 3 seconds, almost 5,000 login transactions happened through our platform. So that's a lot of logins and a lot of interactions. And between 30 and 40%, roughly speaking, of all that traffic, it's not legitimate traffic. It's attacks. It's people trying to break into our customers' systems. And that's something that we prevent. And so with the rise of the opportunity, there's also this concern of being aware of the problems of not doing this properly. And identity management, and this is more of like the reason we exist, it's a complex subject. It's very simple to make mistakes. And people, it's deceptive in a way. You look at the login screen and you say, how hard could it be? It's one text box for the username and another text box for the password and one button. One window with 2 text boxes and a button. How hard could it be? And it turns out that it's really, really hard to do properly. And that's what we specialize in. And in a way, that's the opportunity that our company is experiencing and many security companies are experiencing in line with the situation that we are living in. I think that the other opportunities, not just digital transformation, the other opportunity is an opportunity of remote work, which we were in a way pioneers in that. As I said, we've been practicing for almost more than 7 years how to do remote properly, and it caught companies kind of off guard. But there's a lot of advantages to running a distributed company. And one of them, the first one, is that talent is everywhere. There's no place in the world where there's no talent. Talent is anywhere where people are. And we were able to tap into a much bigger global talent pool by just looking outside our centers of gravity. So like Seattle, where I live, or BA in Argentina, there's talent everywhere. We employ and we find amazing, amazing people all over the world, in Latin America, in Europe, in Asia, everywhere. And so it's somewhat, it's not automatic, I would say. It's not like you have to be deliberate in the way you engage with your teams, how you build a team, how you foster collaboration and communication, and how you make sure that they're still productive. And I think people now realize, companies realize that that's another missed opportunity, that they can expand, that they can grow faster, that they can compete better, that they can serve customers better, that they can also build a more diverse company by just not constraining themselves to hire only in the city where their company is founded. And I believe, and that's looking maybe beyond just the talent component, it's look at all the opportunities for people who cannot move, who cannot leave a house. And even though we made a lot of progress in terms of things like disabilities, and there's a lot of people who are just leaving the house and going to an office. It's a hurdle, and it's a burden that now they don't have, and they have a lot to offer. So I think that's going to be another big opportunity. And we have a lot of lessons learned around that topic in particular that we've been publishing and giving back to the community, and hopefully you will find useful as well. All right, so I think I kind of covered the big things that I wanted to cover. Of course, there's a lot more to maybe double click on, but I also wanted to have an opportunity for answering your questions. So I'm going to wrap it here, maybe hand it back to you, Itzel, and let us go to Q&A.
Absolutely. There's a lot of questions coming in, a lot of interest from the audience. Maybe picking up on this last topic you were speaking about in terms of the distributed company, right? with your, and especially with your experience starting a business in the United States, what can you say to entrepreneurs from Latin America that might be considering tackling the US market? Is it worth setting up shop in the US anymore, or would you advise staying in Latin America and then trying to capture the US market from wherever they are?
So I don't think there's a magic recipe for that. Unfortunately, there's no like, oh, do this prescriptive 1, 2, 3. In my case, it was natural for us to be based in the, like formally based in the US, but we have a strong presence everywhere else. So if you ask me personally, I think there's an opportunity to do, there's truly a global market. I think presence in the US, it's important. And so consider that as maybe a second step as you grow and as you expand your footprint. Obviously, depends on what you do, but for a tech company like us, the US is a massive market. And so clearly, it's still a very important market. 60% of our revenue is Americas. So for a company our size, typically you would see like maybe 80% or 90% of the revenue being in the US. For us, it's 60%, of which that 60% is not just the US, it's all Americas. We have great customers in Latin America, great customers in Brazil, in Mexico, in Argentina, in Chile, everywhere, really. But I'm speaking from my own experience. Clearly, US, big market, there's a lot of opportunity to grow and develop and raise capital, which obviously it's a big part of entrepreneurship. And so capital markets in the US are very developed, and that's clearly one of the advantages and one of the things to consider.
Right, okay. Here's a controversial one. Something that was mentioned last year was that that among cybersecurity professionals, there was a feeling that the attackers were moving faster and innovating faster than the good guys. Is that still the case?
So I'm not sure if it's faster. I like to think that we move really fast too, and we outpace them. But it is true that today the technology available for attackers is just equally powerful, right? So technology is agnostic. Technology doesn't make a distinction between good guys and bad guys, unfortunately. And the world that we live in today, it's amazing for entrepreneurship, because we have the power at the tip of our fingers. We have the power of hundreds of servers and bandwidth and network and equipment that when I started, like 25 years ago, it was unimaginable, right? That a company, let's say in Argentina or in any country in South America, would have access to like the infrastructure that only big multinationals were able to afford. Right. Launching a highly distributed, massive attack from all over the world today costs a couple $1,000s. So it's really easy to do like a really sophisticated attack these days. So yes, it is concerning. I think I mentioned already, half of our traffic is attacks. So it is increasing. And that's, the reason we put so many resources in this particular problem. You might think like, really an entire company just for logging, just for authentication and authorization? Yes, because that's the door to any applications. And we spend a disproportionate amount of resources that nobody can. 40% of our company is product people, right? So 40% of the 700 people are engineers, security specialists, threat analysis, intelligence gathering, it's network specialists, it's anything around delivering the service for our customers. No one can afford having hundreds of people just for login and just for authentication and authorization. We can. That's kind of the value that we provide.
There's another question here that says, on cyber attacks, we've seen that not only the very large companies are the ones being targeted, we've seen in the news as well that attacks with things like ransomware are increasingly hitting relatively smaller companies, certainly mid-sized companies. Is that accurate? And do you see cyber attackers going for SMEs as well?
Yes. So we don't see discrimination. There's going to be attacks where value is. And sometimes value is associated with big companies for sure, but there's value also in smaller companies too, because of the identities, specifically in our case, is like the individual accounts that then can be vectors of attack in bigger targets. And so you go for the weakest link, maybe a smaller company that doesn't have all the resources precisely to secure everything. And then from there, unfortunately, people reuse username and passwords, which is not a good practice. Mm-hmm. So if anything from this session, use a password manager, one. Second, turn on MFA, multi-factor authentication anywhere you can, even if it's not the most sophisticated MFA, even if it's an SMS MFA, is better than nothing. But use a password manager for everything, because then it's a weakest link. You break into something small and then you use that to break into something big. And that's why we see it pervasively.
And follow up to that question, what kind of minimum security technology should an SME company have to be protected? What would you recommend?
Well, obviously we are there to help, so that's but I don't want to over advertise our service. Of course, we are willing to help. One thing that I didn't mention of our company that it's kind of unique, and it might be a misunderstanding, it's that yes, we are an enterprise software tech company, right? But we are also a freemium company. We are a company for the full spectrum of developers. We have programs for startups. We have programs for nonprofits. We have programs for a single developer working on a weekend on a side project. We have the service available for them for free in some cases. So our service is available in the full spectrum, whether you're a big company or if you're one developer working from home or somewhere in between. Mm-hmm. And so the best practices is to, I would say the very first thing is to not try to reinvent the wheel yourself, because this is a wheel that it's very dangerous to reinvent. And I wouldn't advise to say, oh, how hard could it be? I'm going to go and do it on my own. That's not a good idea. Use the industry standards. There are industry standards that are public that you can go and use as templates to implement this. Of course, we follow those standards as well, right? So we are an easier way to get that implemented, if you will. But I mentioned a few things, enforce good password protection, leverage things like Touch ID, biometrics, which Apple has done a really great job in democratizing. Like the fact that my mom can use, her face on a phone, which sounds a little bit like science fiction. It's so much better than a password on a Post-it. That I would say, as a developer, leverage those best practices that are like, way more robust. Turn multi-factor authentication, use password managers. So there's plenty of options and low-hanging fruit to get you started.
Awesome. Maybe just to close off, because we're getting near to the end of the session. We know you're a busy man and we don't want to keep you for too long. But maybe you're Latin American yourself. You know that in the region we tend to be very skeptical about the information that we give. And for example, I remember, my grandmother, the first time that we told her, like, oh, you're going to use your face to unlock a phone. She's going to be like, I'm not going to give my face to anyone. What do you mean? Like, who's having this information? And this is still a very real thing, I feel, in like that we see in our region. I want to ask you how pervasive that is still, not only in the region, in the world, and how do you tackle that from Auth0?
For sure, I can totally relate to that problem because, coming from being Latin myself, I'm always like skeptical and doubtful. Why are they offering me this? Why are they doing this? I'll tell you a funny story. I bought some chocolates for my mom,
Yeah,
and I bought it online, of course, and I sent the chocolates to her home, and she rejected the chocolates because I didn't tell her,
of
and so
course.
she said like, "Yes, madam, I have chocolate for you," and she said like, "No, that's I didn't order that. It's
Anything?
not
No,
for me."
sorry. Yes.
So I have to implement like a multi authentication protocol with her,
Yes,
which actually spoils the surprise because there's no surprise anymore. But I say like somebody will go ring the door and there's gonna be chocolates for you, so it is okay. It's
yeah.
don't trust it. It's okay.
Panic. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
So I think one thing I didn't mention is the privacy and power to the consumer. That's a trend that we're seeing. And I think that's something that companies will need to also be aware of and say, there's value in providing that level of trust, like saying, no, we are not going to sell your information.
Mhm.
Yes, you are going to have the empowerment to control what you disclose your to anybody else, right? So yes, you're giving me your email. How am I going to be responsible with that email? And we see some trends evolving. I'm not so sure about the Latin American trends, but Europe, it's probably a spearhead of these in privacy laws.
Mhm.
GDPR is the primary example of these, which are very stringent
Mhm.
laws, and they have like very serious consequences if you break them. And so power to the user, power to the consumer in terms of disclosures, managing privacy. It's another big trend that all companies will have to be aware of precisely because of this problem. California has the same, you know, kind of modeled after Europe. So it's called I think I get this right, is CCPA, and it's like consumer protection
Mhm.
provisions. My prediction is that that's going to spread out everywhere. So everybody will be modeling that after Europe, perhaps with iterations and better versions of it.
And so companies should be smart to start integrating these earlier rather than later,
Yes,
especially if their competitors will too, right?
exactly.
Wonderful. Well, Eugenio, we're very again cognizant of time. Thank you so much for your time today. This was very interesting. I wish we had 30 more minutes to chat, but we'll just have to organize a whole other event and invite you again, just to have you on again. Thank you so much for your time today. And to our audience, thank you for joining us today. I'm sure you enjoyed this as much as we did. Don't forget that we have our last session of the day and the closing small ceremony, virtual ceremony of the event at 4:30 p.m. today. Eastern Time. Thank you again, Eugenio. Muchísimas gracias, and we'll see you soon.
Gracias a todos. Adiós.
Ciao.